June 7, 1944. The day after the greatest amphibious invasion in history. In the dense, claustrophobic hedgerows of Normandy, the cream of the German Wehrmacht prepared for the counterattack. They had trained for this moment. They had been told they would face vast columns of heavy armor, tanks, and massive trucks. They expected the grind of a conventional war, where every machine counted. But what unfolded on the narrow, ancient roads of the Bocage was not a conventional war. It was a revelation. It was a shock that would ripple all the way back to Hitler's high command. And it wasn't delivered by the Sherman tank or the B-17 bomber. It was delivered by a tiny box-shaped vehicle with no doors, no proper armor, and a reckless speed. It was delivered by the Willis MB, the Jeep. Near the town of Smeals, Oberleutnant Klaus Muller of the 709th Infantry Division watched with chilling disbelief. In just 2 hours, he counted over 100 of these vehicles streaming inland from Utah Beach. They weren't just transporting troops, they were everywhere. They were carrying commanders, pulling trailers of artillery shells, rushing wounded men back to the beaches, and darting through terrain that his own heavy vehicles could never conquer. Muller's confusion quickly turned to dread. His diary would later reveal the profound psychological impact of what he was witnessing. He observed an American crew strike a mine. The Jeep was instantly wrecked. But the crew simply transferred their gear to a replacement vehicle that arrived minutes later and continued their mission. The shattered machine was simply abandoned. 1. Unthinkable in the resource-starved German military, where every single machine was meticulously repaired and returned to the field. This was the crucial difference. Germany fought a war of perfection, where every piece of equipment was a feat of specialized engineering, built in limited numbers. America, by contrast, fought a war of abundance. The Jeep was not a prized jewel. It was a tool, designed for a 90-day combat life, then to be replaced. The machine was disposable, and its supply seemed limitless. By the time the German officer Oberleutnant Muller made his observation, American factories were rolling out a new Jeep every minute and a half. For the German officers, this wasn't just a military disadvantage, it was a societal one. It was the stark realization that they were not fighting an army. They were fighting an entire industrial civilization on the move. Obstrittführer Hans von Luck of the 21st Panzer Division summed up the feeling of the German command in a single, devastating sentence: a quiet surrender that went far deeper than the field of battle. "The war is over," he wrote. The speed, the simplicity, and the sheer, unstoppable volume of that little quarter-ton truck had demonstrated, beyond any doubt, the inevitability of their defeat. This is the untold story of logistics, of production, and of how the world's simplest war machine shattered the morale of the Third Reich. The German officer's pronouncement, "the war is over," was not a tactical assessment based on a map. It was a philosophical surrender. It was the realization that their entire military doctrine was fundamentally flawed when faced with the sheer scale of the American industrial machine. For the Wehrmacht, the measure of success was perfection. Every piece of equipment, from the 88mm gun to the massive Tiger tank, was an engineering masterpiece, complex, meticulously crafted, and built for maximum lethality. This was the doctrine of perfection. Germany believed that a smaller, perfectly engineered force could defeat a larger, less sophisticated one. Their quarter-ton equivalent to the Jeep was the Kübelwagen, a light, tough vehicle, but built by Volkswagen in limited numbers and with specialized parts. It was, in a way, a luxury of scarcity. But this pursuit of perfection masked a catastrophic logistical weakness. While American troops were arriving in Normandy fully motorized, over 60% of the German transport system still relied on the horse. A terrifying statistic. The Wehrmacht deployed more horses in World War II than they did tanks. When German supply lines stretched, the system collapsed. A single broken part on a Tiger tank often meant the entire $250,000 machine had to be abandoned. They were fighting a war of irreplaceable assets. The Americans, however, embraced a different philosophy: the power of plenty. Their military planners didn't start with the question, "What is the best vehicle we can build?" They started with, "What is the simplest vehicle we can mass produce in the hundreds of thousands?" The Jeep was the answer. It was designed to be simple, rugged, and, most critically, interchangeable. When the U.S. Army settled on the Willis design, they immediately instructed the Ford Motor Company to build an identical copy. This was industrial strategy disguised as warfare. Every single nut, bolt, engine part, and body panel had to be identical, whether it rolled off the Willis assembly line or the Ford assembly line. This interchangeability was the true, hidden weapon. It meant that a destroyed Jeep could be replaced instantly, and its parts could be salvaged to repair dozens of others. Now look at the numbers, and the philosophical chasm becomes clear. Over the course of the war, German factories produced approximately 13,000 Kübelwagens, a respectable number, but a drop in the ocean. The United States, operating under the full fury of the power of plenty, produced a staggering 640,000 Jeeps. In the peak of production, a new Jeep was rolling off the line every 90 seconds. This disparity was not just a failure of German logistics, it was a failure of imagination. The American military was capable of absorbing catastrophic losses in men and material, replacing them immediately, and continuing the advance. This was a war against an economic system that could simply print new transport vehicles as quickly as it printed money. The German officer was not merely seeing a light-duty vehicle, he was seeing an industrial avalanche. The Jeep, a simple quarter-ton truck, was the perfect symbol of this overwhelming force. It embodied the American doctrine. If it breaks, toss it and grab another. In the next segment, we'll dive into the urgent, breakneck story of the Jeep's creation, and how a 60-day emergency competition gave birth to an indispensable tool that cost just $738, but ultimately helped win the war. By 1940, the storm clouds of war had gathered over Europe. America was officially neutral, but its military was preparing for the inevitable. The U.S. Army needed a vehicle unlike any other. It had to be light, four-wheel drive, capable of reconnaissance, artillery spotting, and general utility. The official specification was for a quarter-ton, 4x4 truck reconnaissance. The deadline was brutal, and the need was immediate. This was the moment of destiny for the Jeep, defined by just 49 days. 3 companies answered the call: American Bantam Car Company, Willis Overland Motors, and eventually, the behemoth, Ford Motor Company. The specifications handed out were mercilessly tight: a 1,300-pound maximum weight, a 9-foot maximum wheelbase, and a demanding performance checklist. Bantam was the first to deliver, in a furious effort, producing a working prototype in the almost unbelievable time frame of just 49 days. A feat of American ingenuity under pressure. But Bantam was small. It lacked the production capacity the Army knew would be required for a global conflict. The contract was eventually awarded to Willis, primarily because of one defining piece of engineering: the Willis Go Devil engine. This engine was simple, tough, and critically, it produced significantly more torque than its competitors, giving the vehicle its legendary climbing and pulling power. It was pure, robust, and uncomplicated, the ultimate anti-German engineering solution. The final price tag for this simple, yet revolutionary machine was a paltry $738 per unit. Now contrast that once more with the thousands required for a single, complex German machine. This low cost was the enabler of the power of plenty doctrine. If the vehicle was cheap enough, you could afford to lose it. But the Army knew even Willis couldn't meet the numbers required to fight a two-front war. In a pivotal strategic move, the government took the finalized Willis blueprints, including the revolutionary Go Devil engine design, and handed them directly to Ford Motor Company. The instruction was clear: build it exactly the same. The result was the Ford GPW. The G for government, P for the 80-inch wheelbase, and W for Willis. Crucially, every single component from the Willis MB was interchangeable with the Ford GPW. The industrial genius was not in the design. It was in the mandate of total, standardized interchangeability. This tiny, hastily designed vehicle was immediately recognized by the highest levels of command as a war-winning asset. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, famously declared that the 4 most essential tools of American military operations were the C-47 transport plane, the bazooka anti-tank weapon, the American-made self-propelled shovel, and the Jeep. The $738 utility truck had proven its engineering superiority not through complex mechanics, but through pure, unrestricted output. From the factory floor, the next stage of its destiny was the battlefield. How did this little 4-wheel drive machine, no bigger than a tractor, manage to break the German defenses in the most challenging terrain of the European theater? The answer lies in the unforgiving, hedge-lined hell of the French bocage. We return to the core realization that stunned the German command. the disposable nature of the American war machine. For the Wehrmacht, a battle was not just about taking ground. It was about conserving resources. Every lost vehicle was a material and industrial setback. A German soldier encountering a broken-down vehicle would spend hours, even days, attempting to meticulously repair it, dragging it back to a limited workshop for salvage. This was survival. The American approach, symbolized by the Jeep, was an insult to this German mentality. It was the epitome of waste, or as the Americans saw it, efficiency. When a Jeep was damaged beyond quick repair in the field, it was often left by the side of the road. It was considered an expendable asset, often given a service life of just 90 days before its expected loss. This was the moment the psychology of the war shifted. The Germans were fighting a desperate, holding action with limited stock. The Americans were fighting with an open, inexhaustible warehouse. This reality was encapsulated in the chilling observation made by German military officials. Lieutenant Colonel Otto von Schroeder of the Luftwaffe, observing the American advance, wrote a phrase that has echoed through military history. The Americans fight a rich man's war. They expend vehicles the way we expend ammunition. This was not just a complaint about superior numbers. It was the psychological acknowledgement of being defeated by an overwhelming economic reality. They were not merely fighting soldiers. They were fighting the Detroit assembly lines. This psychological domination was made physically real by the Allied logistical leviathan, the Red Ball Express. This massive truck convoy system, often run by courageous Black American drivers, served as the main artery, rushing thousands of tons of supplies from the Normandy beaches deep into France. But the Red Ball Express could only go so far. It required the Jeep to complete the mission, the vital last-mile delivery. Jeeps, carrying everything from field radio batteries to cans of K-rations and, yes, desperately needed ammunition, became the capillaries of the Allied advance. They cut through the back roads, bypassed traffic jams, and drove directly into the heart of the forward positions. The German soldiers were constantly harassed, constantly under fire, and constantly demoralized by the simple fact that no matter how many vehicles they destroyed, the stream of American supply, of which the Jeep was the smallest, most constant element, never stopped. The sight of a destroyed German heavy truck meant the loss of vital supplies for days. The sight of a destroyed American Jeep meant the driver would simply flag down the next one, transfer his critical cargo, and continue his mission. This perpetual motion, this mechanical and logistical arrogance, crushed German morale far more effectively than any artillery barrage. They had believed in the superiority of their perfect machines. They were defeated by the efficiency of America's disposable ones. The Jeep, costing less than $750, became the ultimate symbol of democratic industrial power, a power that could afford to trade quantity for quality, replacement for repair. The officer who stated, "The war is over," understood that the battle was no longer being fought over territory or tactics, but over factory output and the psychology of supply. In our final segment, we will examine the incredible post-war legacy of the Jeep, how it shaped the world's military and transport needs, and how this simple, square vehicle cemented its place not just as a tool of war, but as an enduring icon of American ingenuity and the velocity of Allied victory.